Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So hello everyone, welcome to Basics Discussion Circle and Meditation. My name's Travis, I facilitate this group. So it's been a couple weeks since I've been online. Wondering how y'all are doing. If you'd like to say hi or share anything that may be on your mind, there's the live chat right there. I'd love to hear from you. It's been a while since I've been on here. Yeah. So for tonight's class, we'll start with a breath meditation. I might take it in a different direction than normal. We'll see. Yeah. And then for discussion, or the talk, we might touch on the principle of non-self. I'm just talking to a friend today and it came up in the conversation. So it's kind of on my mind. So we might be talking about that. We'll see. Unless some other random thing pops up into my head during the meditation. Yeah. Hello, Brian. It's good to have you here. So, yeah, I think we'll get started. If you're new to meditation, a few things before we get started. In terms of posture, it's helpful if you're sitting on a chair to have feet flat on the ground. Maybe not fully utilizing the backrest because it's easier to fall asleep if you do. If you're sitting on the floor, it probably means you have a setup at home and you generally know how to sit. And for I like to bring the shoulders up and back and then rest them down into a really solid posture. The tongue can be pressed up against the roof of the mouth, gently against the back of the teeth, prevents the buildup of saliva, which can become a distraction. Our goal, if anything, with the meditation isn't to think nothing. Our goal with the meditation isn't to have no thoughts arising. Our general goal is to acknowledge that these thoughts are arising, but not hop on board of that thought train. So meditation, even in like the professional meditator's mind, which I'm not, in an advanced practitioner's mind, there's still thought. They just don't go along with the thought. They're able to not to push it away, not to grip onto it, but to just let it be there as long as it's going to be there and fade away, but not feed into it. They keep their focus and attention on whatever the object of meditation is. Tonight, that would be the breath. So we'll have all sorts of thoughts arise. And that doesn't mean we're doing a bad job of meditating. When we have a thought of arise and we come back to the breath, that's a success. It's not a failure because you got distracted. It's a success because you came back. So that's pretty much it. So with that, let's get started. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Just noticing how deep breathing feels for the body. If it feels good, you can maintain it. If it doesn't, you can switch things up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow. In long and out short. In short and out long. Faster or slower. Just taking a few minutes to tune the breath. To tune the breath to the body, tune the breath to the mind. Noticing what works in this moment. And once you've found a rhythm and texture of breathing that does feel good for the body, you can just maintain it. And as you maintain this rhythm of breath, you can notice if you're holding any tension around the breathing process. If you're tensing up or constricting around the breath, either squeezing the breath in or forcing the breath out. And see if you can soften up a bit around that process. The breath will come in and out without you forcing it. So just allow the breath to maintain this rhythm, this comforting rhythm. You can slowly begin to expand your awareness out from the breathing process. Just slowly, gradually expanding outward through the body. Noticing if there's tension in the shoulders and the neck. In the forehead, around the eyes. And seeing if you can imagine this breath flowing through these areas of tension. Dissolving it away all the way through the in-breath and keeping these areas relaxed all the way through the out-breath. With the forehead and the eyes relaxed, the neck and the shoulders softened, you can gradually guide your awareness down the body, noticing if there's any tension in the chest as you breathe in and out, and consciously relaxing it. Guiding breath and awareness down into the stomach. Repeating the same process here. Becoming aware of tension and using the breath and awareness to dissolve the tension, to soften the stomach. With the chest and stomach relaxed, you can move down the arms and the legs. Noticing any tension there and relaxing it. If you want, imagining the breath flowing through the arms and the legs. Washing away the tension. Expanding breath and awareness all the way out to the tips of the fingers and the toes. And then slowly at your own pace, scanning back up through the body, repeating the same process. Clearing out any tension that you may have missed through the first pass through. From the tips of the fingers and the toes all the way up to the crown of the head. with breath and awareness suffusing the body from the crown of the head out to the tips of the fingers and the toes. Now, instead of scanning through the body, you can settle in whatever spot you find it easiest to maintain focus. And then allow your awareness to expand out from there. So you're filling and aware of the entire body as you breathe in. And you're soothing the entire body as you breathe out. If you notice your awareness shrinking, no big deal. Just stretch it back out again. This centered but broad awareness. Permeating this breath awareness all the way down into the organs and all the skin, suffusing the body. And as we maintain this full bodied awareness, you can try holding the perception in mind that our awareness can expand past the boundaries of the body. Focusing on where the air meets the skin. And you're aware of the air in your lungs, so why can't you be aware of the air that's around you? In a sense, it's all breath, regardless whether it's inside or outside. It's the same stuff. So just allow your awareness bit by bit with each breath to expand out past the boundaries of the body. Allowing your awareness to be expanded further beyond the body, using the sensation of the air on the skin and the ambient sounds of the room around you. Just allowing your awareness and your breath to expand, to fill the room that you're in, bit by bit, never in a rush. And as we expand out our awareness and our breath to fill the space around us, we can remind ourselves that the only difference between this body and the space around it is a collection of perceptions and labels and opinions that we have about them. But fundamentally, they're no different. We came into being from a chain of cause and effect, and our surroundings came into being from a chain of cause and effect. The only division is within our own mind. And for the last few minutes of this session, when you're ready, guide your awareness back to where your body meets your seat, where your feet meet the ground. You can make note of and rest in that sense of solidity. You can take a few good deep breaths all the way down through the body. Slowly opening the eyes and stretching as needed. So as always, if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them, or if anyone would like to share anything that brought up for them, a question, a comment, anything like that, I'm always interested to engage. I've led this type of meditation a few times now. I always lead it a little bit differently, as I do with any of the meditations that I guide, because I don't want anyone listening to get too attached to a specific set of rigid instructions. There's kind of general outlines to follow when trying different meditation practices, but it's important to, and it comes with practice, comes with experience, to recognize how to kind of stitch those steps together in a way that works for you, to be able to kind of check off those key points of that type of meditation, but to be able to make it flexible to what you respond best to. So that type of meditation is intended, as I mentioned at the beginning of class, I was talking earlier with a friend about non-self, self versus non-self. And so I thought I'd kind of touch on it a bit during the meditation, then we can talk about it a bit now. So that meditation, something that it's an approach that I came up with from reading about Japanese archery and the type of meditation that they would often do in Japanese archery, which was to, get in tune with the breath and then be able to maintain a perception, basically to be able to maintain a perception that you, the bow, the arrow, the target are all the same thing. They're all one existence. They're not separate things. And then the arrow can fly more truly and strike the target. So it was kind of intended to replicate a feeling that can often happen for people when they meditate. The sense of the shape of the body starts to fall away. There's still sensation, but the rigid shape of the body tends to fall away, and it's more like a cloud of sensation. And when this happens, it's a lot easier to focus because it's not these sections, it's all this unified kind of whole. And that's what this type of meditation is intended to elicit or get in touch with. So one way of thinking of this is what I had mentioned, this non-self. And I would like to touch on kind of defining non-self. But first, I'll read the chat. Brian had shared, the air in my room is cold. Was the air in your room cold, or were you cold? And is the air in the room and you two things or one thing? Sherry, we missed you. So glad you're back. I found it helpful when you said to have a focus in one place of the body, and then to have a broader awareness, being able to move back and forth. The one thing. Excellent. So it's interesting that you mentioned being able to move back and forth. My teacher, Ajahn Jeff, the teacher that I kind of reference the most in my practice, one image that he gave, there's kind of two images, but one image that he gave that I really liked with that style of meditation of having one focal point, and then that's like the center of your awareness, and then expanding the peripheral vision of your awareness out from there. He said it's like putting a candle in a dark room. you light the candle flame and the flame's concentrated at one point, but it still manages to illuminate the entire room in this kind of pulsing. So it's interesting you mentioned the moving back and forth from it. That's a visualization. I don't bring it up that often, but I should, because I found it personally very helpful, having that mental focal point, I guess you would say, the candle in the dark room. So I'd like to take a step back and define what anatta, the Buddha called anatta, or what's often translated as no self. So you have self and no self. But I don't particularly like that translation, because no self is falling into an extreme. So in the Buddha's time, there was kind of two main viewpoints that the Buddha would dispute. And one was eternalism, that things can last forever, that you could be in a state of being that lasts forever. And then the other was nihilism, or that, nothing really exists, or things end. This is also sometimes called annihilationism, but it's when things end, they end, there's no continuation. And the Buddha tended to prescribe to more of a doctrine of constant flux, constant change, rather than things staying the same forever or things ending forever. So to me, no self is falling into that extreme of nihilism or annihilationism, where when the Buddha is talking about anatta, it's more accurate to translate it as non-self. Non-self doesn't specifically state that there's no self, and it doesn't state that there is a self. Non-self is a doctrine that the Buddha used and often prescribed more as a perception that is useful. And it's a perception that's useful some of the time, but not all of the time, right? And the example that I gave my friend was the perception of non-self is useful in situations where we're really obsessed with something, we're really attached to a certain thing, a certain person, a certain aspect of ourselves. Like, without this aspect, I'm not me, right? But maybe it's not the most beneficial aspect for you to cling on to. Without my stubbornness, I wouldn't even be me. But then your stubbornness gets you into so many situations that you're too stubborn to admit as an issue. And then you find it difficult to backtrack yourself out of it or remove yourself from the situation, because you're taking pride in your stubbornness, or your, some might call stubbornness ardency, but it's stubbornness ardency is different. So in those kind of situations, a perception of non-self, of acknowledging that whatever we think we are, whoever we think we are, is a collection of perceptions that we've collected through our lives. And it's not necessarily who we are. It's just a collection of perceptions. And when we define ourselves based on perceptions, we limit ourselves. So that's when non-self can be useful. And then when non-self isn't a useful perception, or oftentimes people will kind of equate non-self and emptiness, and they'll use emptiness as an excuse. Well, why should I even go do that thing? Everything's empty, so nothing matters. Or there's no self, so there's no person over there to help that's in trouble because there's no self. Those aren't useful applications of no self. So in those cases, instead of trying to reconcile, well, I still want to have drive, I still want to accomplish things, but I don't want to be giving into my ego and myself and all this stuff, that's just bogging things up. So we can set aside the perception of non-self, and we can adopt a healthy sense of self, a productive sense of self to accomplish those goals. At no point does Buddhism say that you're trying to annihilate yourself or anything like that, or trying to annihilate your ego. You're trying to repurpose things. You're trying to refurbish your ego You're trying to refurbish a sense of self that's more useful, that's more beneficial to you, more beneficial to others. So that's kind of non-self versus no self. Non-self is a useful perception to apply some of the time. And then other times, non-self gets in the way. And oftentimes, non-self's a big source of what Jeff will often refer to as Buddhist arrogance. Well, I'm above all of these things. I don't have to worry about these issues. If I hurt someone's feelings, I'm above it because I'm on my Buddhist pedestal and everything's an illusion. So if you have a problem with that, that's your suffering, not mine. And it's not helpful. It really isn't. So if we can strategically choose when to adopt these kind of lofty Buddhist perspectives, when they're useful, and set them aside and not let them impede basic interaction, basic functioning, the practice becomes a lot more, I don't want to say easier, but a lot less convoluted, a lot less counterintuitive. So that's my thoughts for tonight. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of that? I know the self and non-self topic can maybe be a little too deep or confusing sometimes, but I hope that I reduced it down enough for it to make sense or for a practical use for it to be presented. So the only other thing I'll say, and then we can close unless we get any questions. If you're interested in this topic, I would highly suggest Googling self versus non-self. And non-self would be non-self. So self versus non-self. Lots of people who are a heck of a lot smarter and well-versed in this than me have pages upon pages of essays on the stuff, which may or may not be beneficial to you depending on how you approach your practice. But if you're interested in it, those resources are out there. And also on the Dhamma Talks website, there's a book, DHAMMA talks.org. There's a book on there. I believe it's Self and Non-Self or Self and Not Self. It's just when you go to the book section drop down. There's a book I read quite a few years ago, and it really gave me kind of a better understanding of what's meant by non-self, not like a direct experiential understanding, but a better understanding of the concept and how to implement the perception. So that's one I definitely recommend, Selves and Not Self. I believe that's it. It's got self and not self in the title. You can find it. So there's one question. I'm glad that the explanation was useful, Brian. And then Brian also asked, in what way are non-self and nirvana related? So in the simplest sense, and I try not to talk about nirvana too much because I haven't experienced nirvana. And it's really only useful. Nirvana is something that's more useful as a direct experience than a philosophical debate or understanding about it. The only thing that I would say on that, the way in which they're related is that a thorough and complete understanding of the concept of non-self would ultimately lead to nibbana or nirvana. If we look at, and I won't go into detail because there's like a playlist of like 5 videos on the temple playlist on dependent origination, a little playlist that I did. When we go into dependent origination, these 12 causal links, this process of the way in which the mind creates itself and its own suffering, and on a larger scale, the way everything comes into being is through this causal relationship of dependent origination. Through seeing dependent origination, this cyclical chain of dependent origination, and being able to trace it back, see it fully, see this process in which the mind comes into being, what you're ultimately coming into realization of is this non-self. You're fully understanding the concept of non-self. So yeah, that's about as far as I would go into that. Again, if you want more on dependent origination, there's like 4 or 5 videos on Temple playlist. Yeah. So with that, we will close. If comfortable, please join palms for a dedication of merit. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions without limit or end be healthy, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sangha teya cetasa chaturi sambharatva bharati samabhudaru bhavena samadhammaru bhavena samasangharu bhavena sote hantu nirantarang. Thanks for coming, everyone. I'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your night.